My wife cheated with our best friend, stole $250, $0 inheritance, and now she's trying to claim half of our $1 million house. How do I prove her betrayal and stop her from destroying everything? I never thought I'd be sitting here, writing this kind of story, but after everything that's happened, I feel like I need to get it out. The craziest thing is, I had no idea how deep the betrayal went until it all hit me at once, like a punch to the gut that left me reeling. So here's how it all started. My wife and I have been married for about 8 years now. We met in college. Everything seemed perfect back then. She was beautiful, ambitious, and smart, kind of the girl everyone thought was out of my league. We built a life together, had a nice house, good jobs, and a beautiful daughter. Money wasn't an issue. I worked in finance, she was a marketing exec, and we always seemed to be on the right track. But over the last year, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. Became more secretive with her phone, always keeping it close, even when she was in the shower or in bed. She started working late more often, claiming it was just a new project or some client meeting. She'd come home with a strange attitude, like she was hiding something. I also noticed she was spending more money, buying expensive clothes, jewelry I didn't recognize, and going out with friends more frequently. Initially, I shrugged it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed with work or catching up with friends. But then I found out about the inheritance. My father passed away unexpectedly last year, leaving us a sizable estate, around $250, $0 in inheritance. We agreed to keep it separate, but I started noticing odd withdrawals from our joint account that I had no knowledge of. Small amounts first, then larger ones. I asked about it, and she brushed me off, saying it was just some bills she was paying or investments she was making. Things started feeling off, but I still wanted to believe she was just stressed or overwhelmed. Then one day, I caught her phone open on the bed with a message from someone named Jake. It wasn't just a friendly chat. They were talking about meeting up, about sex, about how much they both wanted to see each other. My stomach sank. I saw enough to know it was more than just a flirtation. I confronted her that night. I was furious, trembling even, holding her phone while she sat there trying to deny everything. She looked me straight in the eyes and lied, saying it was just a harmless message, that Jake was just an old friend and I was overreacting. She said I was paranoid, that I didn't trust her, but I knew better. I saw the way she hesitated, the way her eyes darted around. It was obvious she was hiding something. That moment shattered whatever trust I had left. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. How could she do this? How could she lie so easily? I started digging deeper, going through her emails, her bank statements, her social media. The more I looked, the more I found. There were messages, receipts for hotel stays, and deposits into an account I didn't recognize. It became clear that she was not only cheating but also stealing from us, taking money she didn't have the right to take. But the worst part, I discovered she was planning to claim half of our house, which is worth about $1 million. She's trying to spin it that she deserves her fair share, even though she's been lying, cheating, and stealing behind my back. All of it just hit me like a tidal wave. How much she's been manipulating everything, how she's been living a double life. I felt numb, but a burning anger started to grow. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to find a way to prove her betrayal, to stop her from destroying everything we built. That's when I started formulating a plan. I don't trust her anymore, and I sure as hell don't want her walking away with half of my house, my inheritance, and everything else. I need to fight back, and I'm determined to do it. After I uncovered all that, I knew I couldn't just confront her and hope she'd come clean. It's the kind of person who's good at twisting things around, making herself look innocent even when she's guilty. I needed proof, hard evidence, something that would stand up in court if it came to that. So I started digging more carefully. I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do, but I was desperate. I told him to follow her, find out where she was going, who she was meeting. I also needed to see her financial dealings, her phone records, her bank statements. The pie was expensive, but I knew it was worth every penny. I couldn't let her keep lying and sneaking around. A few days later, I got the reports back. It was worse than I thought. The pie caught her meeting with Jake multiple times, at hotels, restaurants, even once at a nightclub. They weren't just friends, they were having sex, and it wasn't just one time. It was ongoing. That was my breaking point. I had the proof I needed, undeniable evidence that she'd been unfaithful and sneaking around with someone I once trusted. Meanwhile, I also found out she'd been secretly transferring money from our joint account into an account she opened under her sister's name. She'd been siphoning off the inheritance, hiding it in different accounts, probably planning to use it to buy her way out of this mess. The amount she took was close to $150, $0, more than half of the inheritance. She'd been planning this for months, maybe since before I even suspected anything. When I confronted her with the evidence, her reaction was infuriating. She spun a story about how she was stressed, how Jake was just an old friend she'd gotten close to again, and how she was just talking to him. She said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that I was overreacting. Her voice was full of venom, accusing me of spying on her, of not trusting her. She even had the nerve to say I was controlling, that I'd ruined everything because I didn't trust her. I felt my blood boil. It was like she was trying to gaslight me, make me doubt myself. But I had the evidence. I had the texts, the bank statements, the hotel receipts. I told her I was done with her lies, that I was going to take action. I told her I was going to see a lawyer, that I was going to get proof of her theft and her affair, and that I'd fight her for everything she was trying to claim, our house, the inheritance, everything. The emotional toll was intense. I felt betrayed, shattered, and furious. I kept replaying the moments when she'd lied to my face, when she'd looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me. It's a sick feeling, knowing someone you trusted so completely had been living this double life. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for not noticing the signs earlier. But honestly, I was also angry at her for doing this, for destroying the marriage and all the trust we'd built. At the same time, I couldn't help feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sad because I still loved her, at least a part of me did, and I hated the idea of losing everything we had. But relief because I finally knew the truth, and I could start planning my next move. I knew I couldn't just let her walk away with half my house, with the inheritance she stole, and with my life shattered. I had to fight, and I was ready to do whatever it takes to stop her from destroying what's left of our life together. Once I had all the evidence laid out in front of me, I knew I had to act fast, was relentless with her lies, but I wasn't going to let her keep spinning her web. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in divorce and asset disputes. I wanted to make sure I had my bases covered, protecting the house, the inheritance, and making sure she couldn't just walk away with a free pass. My lawyer told me I had a strong case, especially with the proof of her affair and her theft. We discussed how to approach the situation legally. She was planning to claim marital assets, including the house, which she insisted was half hers now. I knew I had to show that the inheritance was separate property and that her theft was grounds for a serious legal response. Meanwhile, got wind I'd hired a lawyer. Her reaction was classic. She started playing the victim, crying, claiming I was ruining her life, that I was trying to control her and take everything just because she made mistakes. It was so transparent. She's always been good at pretending to be the innocent victim, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd seen her lies, her manipulations, and her betrayal. I knew her game. I decided I needed to confront her directly, but carefully. I scheduled a meeting at our house, telling her I wanted to talk about the future. I also made sure to record the conversation, just in case I needed it later. When she arrived, she was bitchy, trying to act like everything was fine, like I was overreacting. She kept insisting she was innocent, that Jake was just a friend, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I let her talk, but I kept my cool. I laid out the evidence I had piece by piece, showing her I knew everything. Her face went pale for a moment, then she snapped back with her usual defensiveness. She accused me of spying, of not trusting her, and said I was just jealous. She threw in some classic lines like how she deserves happiness and that I was trying to control her life. I just looked at her and said, "You've been lying, cheating, stealing. I'm done pretending I don't see what's really going on. She tried to deny it all, but I had her cornered. That confrontation was intense. She yelled, called me names, and accused me of ruining her life. But I didn't back down. I told her I was going to fight for what's mine, our house, my inheritance, and whatever else she's trying to take. I made it clear I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She kept crying, saying I was being mean, that I was breaking up the family, but honestly I felt nothing but cold fury. She pushed me too far. The emotional aftermath was brutal. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been blind for too long, that I'd trusted her blindly, and that I'd been risking everything for a woman who didn't care about me. That's a hard pill to swallow. I kept thinking about our daughter, about what this all meant for her future, and how I needed to protect her from the fallout. I spent the next few days gathering every piece of evidence I could: screenshots, bank statements, witness statements from the pie. I also started preparing emotionally for what was coming. I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about facing the reality that my marriage was over, and I had to be ready to fight for my rights and my sanity. I wasn't going to let her take everything without a fight. I had to protect what little was left of my dignity and my future. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I was in full legal mode, coordinating with my lawyer, gathering more evidence, and making sure everything was documented. Meanwhile, his attitude shifted from bitchy and defiant to downright hostile. She started throwing tantrums, accusing me of trying to ruin her, and even went as far as saying I was harassing her because I was checking her phone and bank accounts. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to make sure I had everything on record. One morning, I got a call from the lawyer. She told me was planning to file a legal claim to half of our house, claiming that because we were married, she was entitled to half of everything. That was the moment I realized I needed to be even more strategic. I knew I had to prove that the inheritance was separate property, and that her theft was grounds for not just divorce but also criminal charges. I decided to set a trap. I arranged to have a private investigator follow again, to catch her in the act of transferring money or meeting with Jake again. Sure enough, within a few days, the pie caught her at a luxury hotel with Jake, clothes disheveled, clearly having just had sex. They were caught on camera, and she didn't even realize she was being watched. That footage was gold. It proved the affair beyond any doubt and showed she was actively lying about her relationship with Jake. Meanwhile, I also found out she'd been secretly making calls to a lawyer friend of hers, someone she'd contacted to figure out how to claim half the house. I couldn't believe how calculated her moves were. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she was trying to spin it in her favor. I decided I had enough. I filed for divorce, citing infidelity and financial misconduct. I also petitioned for a court order to freeze her assets, especially the accounts she'd been funneling money into. I wanted to make sure she couldn't just drain everything before the court could decide. The confrontation with when I handed her the papers was a sight to see. She screamed, calling me a heartless bastard, and accused me of trying to ruin her life. But I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You lied, you cheated, and you stole from us. I'm doing this to protect what's mine and to make sure you don't get away with it." She looked at me with pure hatred, then stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That day, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally took action, and I knew I was fighting for my future. Dread because I knew this was just the beginning. The legal battles, the emotional fallout, the possibility of losing the house, everything was now on the table. But deep down, I knew I had to see this through. I couldn't let her walk away with everything she'd stolen, especially not after all the lies and betrayal. I was ready to fight for every penny, for my dignity, and for my daughter's stability. I just hoped I was doing the right thing, even if it hurt like hell. The court hearings came faster than I expected, and they were every bit as brutal as I feared. Showed up looking colder and more calculated than ever. She brought her lawyer, a slick guy who seemed more interested in spin than facts. I had my lawyer, who was meticulous and prepared, armed with all the evidence, the texts, the bank statements, the hotel footage, the pie reports. I felt ready, but nothing could have prepared me for how intense the courtroom battles would be. His lawyer argued that we were a married couple, that the house was community property, and that her claim to half was valid. She even tried to twist things, claiming I was controlling and that she deserved her fair share because she'd contributed emotionally and financially in her own way. The judge listened patiently, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. I knew I had to fight hard to prove otherwise. My lawyer presented the evidence of her affair with Jake, the stolen inheritance, and her secret transfers of money. We argued that the inheritance was separate property, not marital, and that her theft disqualified her from claiming any rights to the house. I also brought up her manipulation and lies, showing how she'd been living a double life, cheating, stealing, and planning. Her escape. The turning point came when the judge reviewed the evidence of her affair and her financial misconduct. It was overwhelming. The judge asked directly about her actions, and she finally broke down, trying to deny everything at first, then, under pressure, admitting to some of it. She claimed she was confused, that she loved Jake, and that she felt trapped. But I knew better. Her own words and actions had already betrayed her. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, the judge made a ruling. He awarded me full ownership of the house, citing the evidence that the inheritance was separate and that her theft and infidelity disqualified her from claiming any part of the property. He also ordered her to pay back the stolen money, plus damages for breach of trust. The court's decision was a huge relief, but it also meant that plans to claim half the house were effectively over. When I left the courthouse, I felt exhausted but victorious. I knew I'd fought hard and I'd won this round, but I also knew the emotional scars would take longer to heal. On the other hand, was furious. She yelled outside the courthouse, calling me a heartless bastard, and threatened to fight me in every way possible. I didn't care. I'd done everything I could to protect what was mine, and I was finally free from her web of lies. The aftermath was a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I moved out of the house with my daughter, trying to rebuild our lives. I felt angry that I'd been betrayed so deeply, but also proud that I stood my ground. I realized that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair, and I didn't want to stay in a marriage built on lies. I learned that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to fight for what's right, no matter how hard it gets. And now I'm focused on healing, on making sure my daughter feels safe, and on never letting someone betray me that way again. In the weeks that followed, life started to settle into a new rhythm, though it was far from easy. I was relieved that the court had sided with me, that I'd managed to keep the house and stop from taking what she didn't deserve. But the emotional wounds ran deep. Every time I looked at my daughter, I was reminded of how much trust had been shattered, how I'd been by her lies and betrayal. Still, I knew I had to stay strong for her, for myself. I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had happened. I realized how naive I'd been to trust so blindly, how much I'd overlooked the signs of her growing dissatisfaction, her secretive behavior. I also understood that money and the way it's used can reveal a lot about someone's true character. Greed and deceit had almost cost me everything: my marriage, my financial security, and my peace of mind. One thing I learned is that you can't ignore the warning signs, no matter how much you want to believe in the best. If something feels off, if your partner is secretive, spending more than usual, or lying about small things, you need to pay attention. Ignoring these signs only gives betrayal the room to grow. Looking back, I also see how important it was to have a good legal team, to document everything, and to stand firm. Tried to manipulate the situation, to spin her lies, but the facts spoke for themselves. That's a lesson I'll carry forward. Never underestimate the power of evidence, and never let someone manipulate your trust without consequences. Now, I focus on rebuilding my life. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional fallout, and I've become more cautious about who I trust. My daughter is my priority, and I want her to see that even in the face of betrayal, you can stand up, fight back, and come out stronger. I also want to warn others: if you notice red flags, don't ignore them. Trust your instincts, seek advice, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. In the end, I've learned a hard but valuable lesson. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches resilience. I'm not the same person I was before, but I'm wiser now. I know what to look for, and I know I can handle whatever comes next. Life has handed me a brutal lesson in trust, greed, and betrayal, but I'm determined to move forward, better and stronger. And I will never let anyone take me for granted or lie to me again.